Hey, this is the World Advice Channel too. What I want to talk about today is the problem with Paul Joseph Watson, a well-known conspiracy theorist slash right-winger who is well-known on YouTube, okay? And what I'm going to speak about specifically is a problem with his way of thinking. So now I mentioned that, let's get started. So when it comes to the problem with Paul Joseph Watson, what is the problem with Paul Joseph Watson when it comes to his way of thinking? Well, the problem with Paul Joseph Watson when it comes to his way of thinking, aside from all the hateful, hurtful messages he puts out there towards different groups of people, is simply down to the fact that Paul Joseph Watson is a conspiracy theorist who claims to be anti-establishment, yet he supports someone, yet he is a right winger at the same time, which in itself is a part of the establishment. And that's gets me to something that I just really want to discuss though, because I find it so weird that everyone nowadays, particularly, in the right wing, um, seems to have this way of thinking that the right wing is somehow anti-establishment, when in itself it's a party establishment, as well as more specifically conspiracy theorists, you know, which makes no sense because a lot of the so-called policies the conspiracy theorists believe, you know, are not only negative but are caused by the government, have been done by full-blown right-wingers. It To be quite honest with you, even some of our right-wing heroes, you know, for that matter, okay? So the truth of the matter is, I don't really know how that makes any sense when it comes to this way of thinking, okay? Like you say that that the government is planning to do this, and the government's planning to do that, and the government is doing this, the government is doing that, and the government is trying to create a new world order, a one world government that's going to enslave, the world population, as well as reduce the world population, to like 500 million. And all the wars and all the situations going on in the world are caused some way, somehow by the government. Yet at the same time, you support one faction of the government that clearly actually, of course, is a part of the same system that's going to, according to your theory, create this so-called new world order. Like, how does that make any sense? And that's the biggest problem with this whole Paul Joseph Watson, new right wing conspiracy theorist stuff, is that it just diluted conspiracy theorists, especially as someone who's kind of been around and dabbled in some of that type of stuff in like the late 2000s to early 2010s, when it was as authentic as it gets, because I actually realized at the time both systems were a part of the same machine. The truth of the matter is, this new wave of people, of conspiracy theorists, seem to not really be able to understand how that doesn't make any sense, okay? Just like, for example, when you look at Ronald Reagan, who for conservatives is considered the greatest hero for conservatism. He literally represents everything conservatives, believe in, and so on and so forth, despite all the problems he's caused. But aside from that, he's considered a folk hero to conservatives, like the greatest hero of all time. Yet at the same time, you know, um, he had a speech in, I believe, the 1980s, where he mentioned, what would happen if we had aliens attack our planet, and so on and so forth, okay? Could you imagine if we had a new world order? You see what I'm saying now? So that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here. He called for a new world order, which obviously, as anyone who's even remotely familiar with conspiracy theories, whether you're a conspiracy theorist or not, the fact that he mentioned a new world order, it's a massive flag to show that he is, according to their idea, a part of this agenda. And that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here. And it's not even just that. When you look at a lot of these right wing politicians, particularly the Bushes, particularly them, they've been very big supporters of the military industrial complex, which is a very big talking point for conspiracy theorists, whether it could be H.W. Bush, I mean, George H.W. Bush, with him starting the war in the Gulf, in the Gulf area, the Gulf War, to it being, of course, no surprise as well. George W. Bush, who came after him as well, who started a war in a country that had absolutely nothing to do with the actual situation, the so called 9/11 situation, which I'll get to that a bit later. But yeah, like I was saying before, um, were responsible, had nothing to do with the 9/11 attack, and how he had created a situation that literally cost thousands of Americans' lives, as well as made America particularly, due to the Iraq War, trillions of dollars in debt. You see what I'm saying? So that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here, if anything, okay? Um, how does that make any sense? Particularly with the fact that everyone for the longest time in the conspiracy theorist movement, and probably no other person would have had a direct impact on it than Bush himself. The idea that, oh, Bush was responsible for the fall of the Twin Towers, which has been going around for literally over 2 decades now. Oh, Bush knocked down the towers, Bush was responsible, and all that type of stuff. And and that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here. Like, how does that make any sense? How the hell does that make any sense? How the hell can he, on one hand, for these conspiracy theories, claim that the government is out to get us and all this type of stuff, yet at the same time, you support one side of the government that are just as responsible for causing, the so-called problems that will lead to the so-called new world order that needs to be needed, anyway, in the first place. um you know how is the right wing somehow going to be different, and how is Donald Trump some so-called martyr to them, who is also as well, no surprise, was rich, is rich and powerful, who hasn't really struggled a day in his life, willing to go out of his way to save America. That's exactly what I'm trying to get across here. If he doesn't, that's what I'm trying to say. How is he going to save America? A lot of these things that are going on have nothing to do with even poor planning by the Joe Biden administration. All of it just simply is just down to reality, just like inflation. It's affecting the whole world. In all honesty, what the hell does some way somehow is Donald Trump going to fix it? Not to mention, of course, back to the main point, why would Donald Trump, who was born into a life of such privilege, all of a sudden become some so-called saint who's trying to fight against this new world order government? This is exactly where critical thinking comes in the mix, and this is why Paul Joseph Watson's way of thinking makes no sense, especially when you take into consideration how hateful and and derogatory a lot of his beliefs are towards other groups of people. It doesn't make any sense. Besides, at the end of the day, according to that same logic, when he complains about immigrants like black people and this and that, you know, couldn't all of those people have been brought there by the same policies created by the so-called New World Order government? That's working behind the scenes to create all the problems in the first place. Most people immigrate to nations in the West, because they didn't have a choice, because their countries were so terrible, which was apparent, which according to their logic would have been created by the New World Order themselves. So how does that make any sense, though, to hate on them for the things that are being caused when it's actually the globalist fault? Their nations are falling apart anyway because the CIA is trying to destroy their nations to get rid of competition for America, and let alone the West for that matter. You see, this is where critical thinking comes in the mix. A lot of people don't do that. So the truth of the matter is, Paul Joseph Watson's belief system doesn't make any sense. The right wing is not going to save you. They're just a part of the same exact system. If you believe that they're if you believe that the right wing is going to save you, you're definitely sadly mistaken. It's a part of the same system, the same thing. And for the longest time, right wingers were great friends with left wing people, who apparently left wing people are all some way, somehow, exclusively pedophiles and all that sort of stuff. Yet for the longest time, the right wingers are some way, somehow, still, a lot of them for the longest time were friends and hanging out with people who are so called globalists who want to make the world come to an end, as well as worshiping Satan and all this type of shit. So make that make sense for you. So anyway, that is this is my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Just remember, if you like this video and videos like this, remember to thumb this video up and hit the subscribe button. This is all I have to say, and simply put, I'm out. Hope you learned something new. So, bye.